This anime begins with the protagonist, Duke of Death, who lives in an isolated mansion away from the world because his parents decided to send him there due to the curse he received from a witch. This curse allows him to take the life of anything he touches. One morning, while writing a letter to his parents questioning the curse, his servant with whom he lives in that mansion appears. She is a beautiful young woman with blue eyes named Alice Lendrot, who seizes every opportunity to flirt with him as he cannot touch her due to the curse he carries. During breakfast that morning, our protagonist has a conversation with his servant about the letter he wrote. She begins to flirt, but he nervously asks her to stop and quit harassing him. She apologizes, stating that she can't help herself. He then asks her to prioritize her safety since she is the only maid willing to be with him, knowing about his curse, and he doesn't want to lose her. However, she seems to ignore his concerns and offers him a cookie. Despite being surprised by her actions, he attempts to bite the cookie but panics and moves away. She teasingly tells him it was an indirect kiss, causing the protagonist to blush and ask her not to say it out loud. Throughout the day, the Duke recounts how the witch cursed him when he was only 5 years old. He wonders who the witch was and why she did it. He remembers her voice telling him that no one would love him and he couldn't love anyone, leading to a miserable life. Due to this, he hasn't been able to see his family since, as his mother turned her back on him, leaving him in the mansion in the forest. While lost in thought, a butterfly crosses his path, and in an attempt not to touch it, he falls, unintentionally taking the life of a tree branch. His servant appears, asking what he was doing, and once again flirts with him. The next day, a childhood friend named Philip decides to visit the protagonist, who hasn't had any visitors since being sent to the mansion. The Duke feels excited and nervous about the visit, as Philip was the only person who didn't abandon him due to his condition. However, he becomes disappointed when he sees Philip accompanied by bodyguards, and his friend acts nervous around him. Before leaving, Philip asks the servant to accompany him to the bathroom, but he uses this opportunity to interrogate Alice. He tells her to leave the mansion, stating it's dangerous to be with the Duke, but she refuses. The protagonist, overhearing the conversation, confronts Philip, upset that he disrespected his servant, and asks for the real reason behind his visit. Philip confesses that his mother sent him to check on the Duke and reveals that his younger brother will inherit the family title, likely severing ties with him. Despite trying to appear indifferent, the Duke is thoughtful and expresses regret in front of Alice for not having a reciprocated love. She encourages him, promising to stand by his side, and they vow to break the curse together. She assures him that someday she will give him a ring. The next morning, as the protagonist reads a book, Alice appears again and flirts with him, causing the Duke to blush and feel nervous. On that day, the butler, an elderly man with an eye patch named Rob, arrives at the mansion. He apologizes to the Duke for being absent due to a back injury, but also apologizes to the servant Alice as she had to take care of the young man alone. The boy is concerned about his butler, who despite recovering from the injury is working hard since his return. The Duke has great appreciation for Rob, who has been with him since childhood, and since he moved to the mansion, considering him like a father. Therefore, he suggests sharing household tasks with Alice. While walking down the hallway worried about Rob, the Duke is approached by him from behind. In an attempt to find Alice, Rob merely touches the Duke, who, frightened, moves away, shouting that it's him. The butler apologizes with a smile, explaining that due to old age, he's becoming a bit blind. The young man scolds him, expressing concern that the aging butler might accidentally touch him and cause harm. However, the old man seems not to hear him well. At that moment, the servant appears, and while the butler asks if she is the real Alice, the young man worries about him. The butler reassures him, saying he will serve him for life, but hurts his back again while attempting to bow. Later, the protagonist is playing the piano in the living room, a skill he developed since childhood and received praise for. He started practicing and composing songs since he arrived at the mansion in case his family decides to disinherit him. During the practice, Alice interrupts, unable to resist approaching when she hears the beautiful melody. He invites her to stay with him to listen to his song. As Alice listens to the melody, she starts thinking about the Duke, and when he finishes, he confesses that he wrote it for her. The next day, Viola, the Duke's sister with red hair, visits the mansion secretly. While having tea, she notices that her brother likes his servant. Interrogating him, he gets nervous and only says he holds her dear. Viola decides to help him conquer her, thinking her brother is in love, but it's just an excuse to tease him. Before leaving, she asks her brother to try to break the curse and return home. As she leaves, Viola stumbles upon the butler, Rob, realizing that her visit was just to see him as she is in love with him. That same night, a small cat appears in the mansion in front of the Duke, who desperately calls his servant to take it out, fearing he might harm it. The cat chases the young man with the intention of attacking him. After capturing it, they realize the cat had a note saying, "Please forgive me." The young man immediately thinks of his mother and feels abandoned, just like the cat. However, more cats appear, and he realizes he has found a new family, just as he did with Alice and Rob. Later, while the Duke observes the moon through a room, Alice approaches him. He tells her that his grandfather used to dance there with the servant's mother. Determined, he invites her to dance without physical contact, and she gladly agrees. The next day, the Duke is playing billiards when suddenly Alice proposes a competition in which the loser will do whatever the winner wants. Due to a mistake by the young man, he loses the bet and his servant is declared the winner. She seizes the opportunity to ask the Duke to do whatever she wants. He imagines she might ask for something indecent, but he is completely mistaken. She requests that he accompany her for a stroll in the village, particularly to a festival where the locals will be dressed in costumes. She suggests he wear a sufficiently thick costume to avoid touching anyone and enjoy a day outside the mansion amidst the crowd. At the festival, the Duke is dressed in a heavy costume to prevent accidental contact with anyone, which seems to be working. However, while walking, he eventually falls and gets lost in the crowd. As Alice searches for the Duke, a strange woman approaches her, mistaking her for her mother and commenting on their striking resemblance before mysteriously walking away. The Duke encounters a lost crying child and decides to comfort him by playing a song on a piano in the middle of the square. Not only does the child cheer up, but the entire town is delighted by his melody. The lost child's mother appears, and along with Alice, they decide to spend the rest of the day together. As they stroll through the festival, the Duke learns about rumors surrounding him and his curse. Later in the evening, they visit a tower where Alice shares a local legend about a princess who married the moon. The Duke immediately relates it to them, expressing his love for her and lamenting the distance between them. He confesses his love, regretting that they are on a date and can't embrace. Surprised by his words, Alice tells him that she had a lovely day with him and wants him to stay by her side always, even if they can't touch each other. Before the night ends, Alice sends a letter to the Duke, inviting him to her room in case he can't sleep. When he tries to enter, he notices that the servant doesn't have any clothes, so he promptly closes the door, asking her to get dressed. Once inside, she prepares tea for him and, after finishing it, asks him to lie down on her bed. The Duke starts imagining what the servant might be plotting again, but he is once again mistaken. She only intended to help him sleep peacefully in her room and apologizes for giving him a wrong impression. Before falling asleep, the Duke asks Alice to accompany him somewhere in a few days. As the days pass, they have a second date, this time by the lake to witness a meteor shower and seize the romantic moment. They both confess their feelings towards each other, but accidentally, Alice falls into the water while trying to grab the Duke's hat. In the water, she asks for a kiss, finding it romantic despite the risk to her life. Although the young man agrees, he regrets it when so close to her, and Alice, unsatisfied, pushes him off the boat into the water. As they dry off after leaving the lake, the Duke openly expresses regret for not taking the opportunity to confess his feelings. Alice hears him and asks what he wanted to confess, to which he replies that he likes her a lot but panics and withdraws. After the events of the previous night at the lake, the Duke continues to regret rejecting the kiss from Alice, thinking that he may have hurt her feelings. At that moment, he is interrupted by his butler and his servant bringing him books that have arrived. As Alice enters, he notices that she ignores him and doesn't act as she did before. Concerned about her change in behavior, he attempts to start a conversation, but she responds with coldness. Desperate for her usual attention, he thinks it might be because of rejecting the kiss, but he soon realizes it's because she's ill from falling into the lake. He decides to take care of her. In the evening, as the young man prepares to rest, Alice is feeling better and gives the Duke a scarf she knitted herself. They promise to go out and have fun in the snow the next day. The next day, with snow covering everything, Alice and the Duke go out to enjoy themselves. Rob decides to make a snowman, but they end up involving him in their game. Upon entering the mansion, Alice realizes she is missing her mother's earring. Upon hearing this, the Duke goes out again to search for it in the midst of the intensifying snowfall. At one point, he seems to tire and faints in the snow. A white bat appears, transforming into the mysterious person Alice met at the festival. Seeing the young man in the snow, she wakes him up. He asks her not to come close, revealing that he is cursed, and explains that he is looking for his servant's earring. Despite her surprise, she asks to be invited inside for some food as she is hungry. The young man faints again, and the stranger begins to melt the snow to find the earring. The Duke wakes up again, this time due to the warmth produced by the girl, and she confesses that she is a witch named Cuff. The protagonist allows the witch into his mansion as she helps him and to ask her questions about witches. Upon entering, they encounter Alice, who is worried about the Duke. The witch grabs the young woman and asks her to show her the way to take a shower. Later, while Cuff is feeding, the young man decides to ask her questions about his curse, the witch who cursed him, and if she could help break the curse. Although initially reluctant to answer, she eventually agrees. However, she tells him that not all witches are friends and she probably can't help him as it happened a long time ago. She shares details about her life and how both she and all witches deal with witch hunts. She mentions that her father was human but died at the hands of witch hunters, and since then she doesn't feel aligned with any group. After Alice hands her the repaired robe, the witch continues on her way. The next day, Alice leaves the mansion and recalls a childhood moment in the snow where children tease her for being the daughter of a maid. The Duke approaches her to help, but the young man interrupts that memory and realizes that she seems a bit strange and might wish for him to hug her. It's a new day, and Miss Viola returns to the mansion to visit her brother. She enters the room where the Duke is, but her attitude quickly changes when she notices that the young man is in the company of the butler. She becomes somewhat shy in front of him because she is in love with Rob. While Viola and the Duke have tea with desserts prepared by the servant, the Duke's sister wonders what kind of woman Alice is. She decides to find out and teaches her charming techniques using the Viola method. Once finished, she shows the results to the young man, who falls under her charms again. However, the butler arrives to inform Viola that her servant is waiting for her to return home. She freezes again in Rob's presence, and her brother tells her that he used his charm method on the old man. However, she becomes nervous and her plan fails, so she leaves for her home. The next day, Viola returns to the mansion, hoping to visit Rob more than her brother. In the kitchen, they decide to bake bread. The Duke leaves his sister with the butler so they can talk, but she finds it difficult to do so despite being a very extroverted person. Later, she confesses to the butler that she envies her brother because despite his curse, he seems happy with the company of his servants who provide emotional support. Rob responds that he is glad to know that she also cares for the young Duke. As Viola is about to return home, the butler stops her to ask her to take the bread they both made and tells her he hopes for her visit again. The next morning, Alice is skating while the young man watches from the edge of the rink. Next to him is a white crow who asks if he has seen someone lost in the forest. Confused because he heard the bird speak, the Duke thinks it's an illusion caused by his fall and head injury. However, the crow asks if he is one of theirs because he possesses magical energy. The young man, surprised, explains that it's because he has a curse and tells about meeting a lost witch named Cuff, who seems to be his friend. As they converse, the young man realizes that the crow is staring fixedly at Alice while she skates. When the servant approaches, the bird introduces itself to her as Zane, a magic user, or rather a witch. The Duke notices a complete change in Zane's attitude when Alice appears. She shows the two guys that she found Cuff hiding in her chest as she was in the lake and seemed cold. Later, they all enjoy an afternoon together skating on the lake. Before Cuff and Zane leave, they inform the Duke that there will be a gathering of witches on the next Red Moon night, and they want to take him so he can investigate the witch who cursed him. Alice takes the opportunity to ask the young man if she can accompany him, as she wants to find out about the strange woman she encountered at the festival. That night, Viola knocks on Alice's door to spend the night with her since her brother didn't allow her to stay in the butler's room. She confesses that she is in love with Rob and asks Alice to keep his secret. Alice in turn reveals that she is in love with a young man who she considers a Prince Charming, as he saved her life when she needed it, making her life worth living, referring to the Duke. As time passes before falling asleep, Viola confesses that she sees Alice as an older sister since her mother always paid attention only to her brothers, and she always wanted someone to pamper her. At that moment, the Duke appears, who had been looking for his sister throughout the mansion. Alice asks him to take care of his sister when she wakes up, as that's what she needs. The next day, the protagonist and Alice decide to go to the mansion's conservatory to read. However, the young man notices that it is somewhat neglected due to the number of plants that have grown. He decides to help the servant by drying the leaves and shrubs to clean faster. Later, he sees Alice looking at beautiful blue flowers and asks her to wither them to finish cleaning. After doing so, he makes her a crown with the same flowers, which she says she will treasure like the flower he gave her. That night, the young man cannot sleep, but he hears Alice's voice. Worried, he rushes out only to find her without clothes, explaining that a cat stole her dress while she was showering. They both go out to look for the cat, and upon finding it, they realize that it scratched her cherished dress, as the young man had previously told her she looked cute in it. Finally, the night of the Red Moon arrives, and Cuff along with Zane go to the mansion to find the Duke. They ask him to prepare to leave, giving them a tunic to conceal their human scent. Through a mirror in the mansion, they open a portal to a completely different world where the witches have different appearances. As the meeting begins, the strange woman from the festival, Dalith, introduces herself as the leader of the witches. Although the meeting is short, Cuff tries to stall so that the young man can gather information about the witch. However, it is Alice who approaches the leader, who recognizes her. When asked if her mother had any relation with the witches, Dalith, with a suspicious tone, claims not to really know her, having only seen her. The witch also recognizes the Duke and his curse, mentioning that she knows the witch who cursed him but cannot help him. The said witch died some time ago, and breaking the curse is beyond her knowledge, as it was not a common curse, and the witch was powerful. Tired of the questions, Dalith burns their tunic, exposing them to all the witches present, who immediately detect their scent and begin to chase them. At one point, a witch is about to catch Alice with a vine, but the young man manages to stop her by grabbing and drying it, saving his servant. They run to the mirror portal until they can finally escape. Once safely back in the mansion, the protagonist asks the witches why they helped him, considering they barely know each other. Cuff confesses that when she met him, she wished to be his friend, making the young man happy to hear this, as he only has his servants. As they are about to leave, the witches tell the Duke that the next time they visit, they will be his friends. A new day arrives, and Alice receives an enormous magical vase she bought in the village, apparently crafted by a witch. Upon looking inside, they find a recipe book and decide to cook something. In the kitchen, the girl tells the young man that the book contains spells and that she will make a love potion. They light the magical vase through a spell, add the ingredients, and Alice asks the Duke to stir, instructing him to think only of things that make him happy. He can only think of his servant. Once they finish the potion, the girl confesses that they were actually making a potion to break his curse. Aware of this, the Duke takes a sip of the potion, and they test it with a flower to see if the curse is broken, but it ends up withering. indicating that their plan did not work. The young man then tells her that breaking the curse will be difficult since the leader of the witches told him it was not a common curse. Still, he thanks his servant for caring and trying to help him. She tells him that she will continue searching for other ways to break the spell. Stating that the magical vase didn't work, the Duke gifts it to the butler, who, upon realizing the vase is alive, becomes excited, as does the vase, happy to have an elegant owner. They leave together, but the Duke notices a strange presence behind him and turns around to see his younger sister Viola, who seems a bit jealous of the gift to Rob. At that moment, Viola's mother begins to notice her absence. Meanwhile, Alice finds it difficult to play sheet music and proposes to the Duke to play it, as she found out that whoever can play it perfectly will be free from a curse. He agrees and starts playing the piano. At that moment, he can see the ghost of the author of that melody, who only bothers him to distract him. Still, the young man concentrates and finishes playing the song perfectly, only to find out that it was a deception and it only freed him from the curse of the ghost author. The next day, the Duke looks for his servant in her room to go to the mansion, remembering his sister telling him about something called a hanging bridge, where scaring someone makes their heart race, often confused with love. Therefore, he decides to scare Alice by hiding, but it doesn't work. Later at the mansion, he tries again by telling her a terrifying story, but it fails. He then attempts to show her a frightening painting, but when searching for it, he notices that it mysteriously appeared hanging. This time, in his attempt to scare Alice, he ends up frightened and he enters a crisis since he couldn't scare his servant or make his heart race. The butler appears, revealing that Alice was the one who hummed the painting the night before to scare the Duke, but he can't hear him due to his fear. Terrified and not knowing how the vase ended up on the wall, he accidentally knocks over a vase with a plant valued by Rob, who eerily asks the young man not to touch them as they are precious to him. Scared, the Duke runs to hide from his butler. Later, Alice finds the Duke hiding in a closet, claiming to be hiding from Rob until he calms down. So she asks her servant to close the door, but does so while hiding with him. There, she tells the young man that when the butler gets angry, he doesn't forgive until you reflect on your actions. They hear Rob approaching, and the servant tells the Duke that she will protect him, but gets too close, causing the Duke to come out of the closet frightened once the butler moves away. They end up hiding under a bed, where Alice takes the opportunity to ask the young man if he feels anxious about growing up. While trying to touch his hand, Rob finds them, showing the Duke some jewelry that belonged to his mother and grandmother found in the remains of the broken pot. Apparently, his former servant tried to steal them but never returned to retrieve them, so he congratulates the Duke for finding them but tells him that they need to talk about breaking that pot. On another different day, we see Cuff paying a visit to the Duke, but instead of having a conversation, the young man and his servants are helping the witch write and read. She wants to surprise her friend Zane, who is currently at the circus where they occasionally work. On the same day, Viola prepares to visit the Duke's mansion, but she is stopped by her other brother, Walter. He seems proud of his physical appearance and being the next heir of the family, but his confidence crumbles when Viola tells him that it won't happen if their older brother manages to break the curse, since he is the firstborn and Walter is only the second son. While having tea, Walter expresses his dislike for his brother being the firstborn and because their mother still believes he can break the curse. Viola, not paying much attention to her brother's concerns, only wants to go to the mansion. Walter becomes desperate upon hearing this and asks her why she's on the side of their older brother and not him. However, Viola makes it clear that she is not on anyone's side and leaves. Walter heads to lunch with his mother, covering for his sister, saying she went to visit a friend. Once Viola arrives at the mansion, she sees Cuff alone in one of the rooms grabbing an ornament. Thinking she's a thief, Viola tries to catch her to let Rob congratulate her. After several attempts, she ties the witch's hands and sits on top of her so she can't escape. However, she notices that Cuff is not worried about the situation until Cuff reveals that she's a friend of the Duke. At that moment, the servants arrive with the Duke, who, upon seeing the uncomfortable situation, decides to leave the two women alone. Later, Alice and the Duke are in the young man's room playing chess on a cold night due to the storm. At that moment, both remember the day Alice arrived at the mansion. It was a snowy day, and the young man was in his messy, dark room, deeply depressed. Rob enters and informs him that he hired a servant with his mother's permission. Alice approaches the room, introducing herself and expressing joy at seeing him again since they knew each other from childhood. Annoyed, he claims not to remember her, as he hated his entire childhood and doesn't want to recall that time. He asks her to return home as it is dangerous for her to be there with him. However, the butler decides to take her to her room. She chooses a room outside the mansion used for storage in very poor condition, but she claims to feel more comfortable in such places. The next morning, the Duke realizes that the servant is still in the mansion and reproaches her about the revealing uniform she is wearing. She teases him about the hat he is wearing, making him blush and get annoyed at changing the subject. The young man is irritated by the servant's presence all the time and tries to distance her by asking her to leave. Seeing that she doesn't leave, he conditions her to clean his room in 3 days, and if she fails, she will be fired. The next day, the Duke is surprised that she managed to organize his room in just one night. She tells him she did it to show that he can count on her. Overwhelmed with tears in his eyes, he confesses that he only wanted to dismiss her to keep her safe. However, she sits next to him to comfort him until his tears disappear. That night, the young man is in the forest during a snowstorm and leaves a note saying he will leave if Alice does not leave the mansion. He starts freezing, feeling sad, lonely, and defeated. He falls into the snow, thinking he is about to die. At that precise moment, he remembers Alice, the little girl he met in his childhood who he wished to see again but forgot due to his curse. Closing his eyes, he hears the voice of his servant and realizes it is her. She went to look for him because she was worried about him and took him back to the mansion. Once there, their great friendship begins, lasting until the present day. The young Duke, waking up from that memory, realizes that Alice won the chess game as he was distracted, and she took advantage of the moment to move the pieces. It's Christmas Eve, and the Duke is excited to celebrate Christmas with his servants and wizard friends after a long time. Meanwhile, Viola is at home, visiting her mother in her room. Her mother advises her to stay home for Christmas and suggests changing her outfit as it appears too childish. Later, accompanied by Walter, who acts as the chauffeur, they head to visit her brother. At the mansion, the Duke is concerned about the lack of Christmas decorations for his guests. As Alice heads to the mansion to give a Christmas gift to the butler, Walter drives the carriage as he wanted to see the condition of his older brother. The Duke suddenly feels chills, and without thinking, Alice asks if he wants her to warm him up. However, they are interrupted by the witches Cuff and Zane, who bring Christmas decorations believing in Santa. After finishing the decoration, including the Christmas tree, Cuff shows the result to her friend, and Zane tells her it looks as beautiful as she does. The witch falls asleep to wait for Santa at midnight, and Zane, annoyed, gently lays her down to rest. Later, Viola arrives at the mansion excited to see Rob. Along the way, she loses her gift, which Walter picks up. Inside the mansion, he finds a Santa Claus costume and uses it to disguise himself. However, Cuff sees him and thinks he is the real Santa. To get rid of her, Walter gives her the lost gift from Viola and tries to escape, but the witch excitedly chases him around the mansion. Meanwhile, Viola searches for her lost gift and unexpectedly falls through the chimney covered in soot. Walter is scolded by his sister for following her, and the Duke realizes he is his brother, whom he hasn't seen in years. Despite showing some joy at the reunion, his brother expresses otherwise, stating that he will inherit the family's power. Cuff interrupts, asking if they've seen Santa as she lost sight of him. Viola notices that she has the gift she intended for Rob, and after a dispute, the witch reluctantly hands it over after burning it. After Walter leaves the mansion waiting outside for his sister, everyone enjoys a beautiful Christmas Eve together. After the festivities, the wizards leave and the Duke and Alice walk in the snow. The young man recalls a day similar to that one when he was lying in the snow and she saved him from freezing to death. Since that day, everything changed and they promised to live their lives together. Following the events, we now see Alice dreaming of a childhood memory living in the mansion. She wanders through the rooms, somewhat lost until her mother, Sharon, finds her. It turns out Sharon also worked for the Duke's family and was a beloved and skilled servant. As they head to their respective rooms, they cross paths with the young Duke, who was a child at the time and didn't have the curse. He greets Alice, causing her to blush. Sharon notices that her daughter escaped her room just to see the young boy and tells her she won't stand in her way, wanting to protect her no matter what. However, Alice wakes up feeling somewhat melancholic due to this memory. The next morning, the Duke's family is having lunch, but Viola notices her mother is upset because none of her children spent Christmas with her. She blames her brother Walter, while he blames his older brother. In the village, Cuff is shopping and her friend Zane secretly follows her to ensure her safety. He had promised Viola to stop protecting her so much, as it hindered her ability to handle things on her own. Although he agrees, he can't help but follow her and assist in every situation that arises, realizing that she can manage without him. During the night, the Duke roams the mansion unable to sleep. Alice suggests they sleep together, and once in bed, he becomes extremely nervous with the person he loves beside him. As she sleeps, he starts admiring her beauty, but she notices and playfully teases him by undressing, making him even more nervous. The young Duke then reveals that his mother wouldn't approve of them sharing a bed without being married. When Alice asks about his thoughts on his mother, he sadly admits to having no strong feelings for her. He learns from his brother Walter that she had been waiting for him, and he believes that if he breaks the curse, they might reconcile and be a family again. He tells Alice that if that happens, he can tell his mother about them and they can get married. However, Alice interrupts him, asking him not to do it. Surprised, he responds that maybe he should think first about breaking the curse. He then asks Alice to leave the room as he wishes each other good night. Upon leaving, Alice feels sad, thinking that if the Duke breaks the curse, he will have to return home to be with his family and become the heir. The next morning, while the butler smokes a cigar, the Duke excitedly shows him the gift Alice gave him, gloves she knitted herself. The elderly man realizes that the young man is smiling more often. The servant calls the young man through a mansion window and he heads inside while the butler remains seated outside, recalling the time when Rob was assigned to take care of the Duke after he was cursed. He initially feared not the curse, but the responsibility of caring for a child. As the boy grew, they had arguments due to everything happening to him. The young man started isolating himself in his room, and due to the loneliness, his fear turned into a desire to end his life. He thought he needed someone his age to talk to, so he turned to Alice, who has become the most important person to the Duke today. The butler notes that Alice knows her purpose there. Despite that, the night before, the young woman visited the elderly man in his room to share her feelings. He tells her that destiny brought them together again, and whatever happens in the future depends on them. But the decision they make will make him happy. At night, the Duke is playing the piano and Alice accompanies him, singing a song as he plays a melody. Eventually, both of them sing together. Days pass, and now we see Viola and her brother Walter in a room in their mansion, searching for clues about the curse of the witch who cursed their older brother. The young woman finds a notebook with records of the servants who passed through their home. She rushes out of the room, asking Walter to clean up the mess they made. On the way, she encounters her mother, who notices her dirty clothes. Viola asks her servant to dress her daughter, and then Viola shows her mother the new dress she made. The mother insists that Viola should start dressing like that from now on, abandoning the childish clothes she usually wears. This upsets Viola, and she goes to the Duke's mansion to tell him what happened. She asks to stay with him and live as his servant with the butler. Rob arrives and comments that the dress makes her look more adorable. Viola suddenly changes her mind and decides to start dressing that way. At night, Alice takes Viola to her room to stay with her. Upon entering, they notice that Cuff is already there, having entered the room without permission to visit Alice. They decide to have a sleepover with the three of them. After talking during the night, Viola gives Alice the book she found in her home, thanking her for what she does for the Duke. Outside the room, an owl is watching them, and through its eyes, the witch Daleth is observing, saying it's time to intervene. She calls Zane, asking him to send a message to their friends. The next day at the mansion, Alice is reading the servant records with Rob. She reads that two women in white had come to the mansion and asks the butler if he remembers anything from that time, but unfortunately, he doesn't. She believes it might be the leader of the witches and another person. Zane arrives to deliver the witch's message to be friends and stay away from the witches. He observes the book Alice has but tells the Duke to go spend time outside. Once the cursed young man gets distracted, Zane loses sight of him, finding him on the mansion's roof with the record's notebook. Zane intends to burn it, but hears the Duke's voice, realizing his plan. Zane reveals that Daleth not only sent a message, but also instructed him to destroy the book or Cuff would be harmed. The book likely contains information that the witch wants to keep secret and might help the young man break his curse. The Duke decides not to burn it and hands it over to Zane. However, the young man asks him to burn it since his friends are more important to him. Seizing the opportunity, Zane uses his hidden power to destroy things and asks the young man for help in deceiving the witch since she was watching. The Duke agrees. In the mansion, the Duke lies to Alice, saying he took the record book to read it. He tells her that he will always protect her no matter what happens. That night, while Zane and the Duke destroy the book, the witch leader watches and realizes they are trying to deceive her. As she removes her mask and heads to a small room, she decides to leave things as they are while observing the body of Alice's mother. The next day, when Rob is at the mansion's door, he receives a letter from the main mansion. Upon giving it to the Duke, it asks him to visit, stating they need to talk. After the events, the day arrives for the Duke to visit his mother. He tells Alice that he feels nervous because he hasn't seen his mother since he was a child. However, he also feels overwhelmed because he wanted to see her again after breaking his curse, but it won't happen that way. Upon hearing this, the servant offers to accompany him and he accepts, thinking that once he sees his mother, he will tell her about Alice. Upon arrival, his younger siblings are waiting for them. Viola informs him that their mother is waiting and that he has to go alone. The servant, without any problem, agrees to visit the household staff in the meantime. Viola and Walter lead their older brother to meet their mother. In the hallway, some servants seem to observe the young man with fear. At the end of the hallway, they reach their mother's room. Before entering, Walter confesses that he told their mother that Viola has been visiting him, and that might be the reason for the summons. He enters the room and is surprised to see his mother, but she informs him that despite 10 years passing, he couldn't break the curse. The young man apologizes and says it will take a bit longer. His mother suggests they talk in the morning and advises him to go to rest as it is late. Outside, his siblings are waiting and Viola tells him that their mother is in a good mood. However, the young man is surprised because for him, it wasn't like that, as he is accustomed to the kindness of his servants. Meanwhile, Alice meets the servants and one of them hugs her, apologizing for not helping her when her mother passed away. Alice returns the hug, remembering her mother's embrace. That servant takes Alice to her mother's room to spend the night there. However, they encounter the Duke's mother, who mistakes Alice for her mother Sharon, calling her by name. Later, realizing her mistake, the Duke's mother leaves. The servant tells Alice that both were very close friends, but after Sharon's death, the lady changed her behavior. The next morning, Viola takes the Duke to the place where the witch cursed him. Upon arrival, Viola mentions that a servant told her it happened in front of a grave. At that moment, the young man begins to recall the incident. It was a spring day, and he was there looking for a 4-leaf clover for Alice when suddenly smoke surrounded him, and a woman grabbed him from behind, uttering the phrase that cursed him. After her words, the 4-leaf clover in his hands withered, and from that moment on, he remained cursed. As they walk through the area, they encounter their mother, who scolds Viola for being too close to her brother, deeming it dangerous. She asks them not to miss dinner since they will talk then. After she leaves, the Duke worries about Viola, but she tells him she's used to her mother's treatment and wishes she could live with him. But neither can her brother Walter. In the evening, dinner time arrives, and like in his childhood, the Duke is seated in the corner of the table, away from his siblings and mother. About to take the first bite, his mother informs her children that their father's condition is worsening, and they must decide on an heir as soon as possible. She puts a condition on the Duke to break his curse before spring. Otherwise, his brother Walter would become the heir. The young man accepts. Seizing the opportunity, he talks about Alice, asking for approval to marry her. However, his mother refuses, stating that he should only focus on breaking the curse and being the family heir. In response, the young man, upset and agitated, confronts his mother, saying that Alice was the only person who loved him despite his curse. She treated him like a normal person, saved him from misery and darkness when his mother abandoned him without concern for him or his siblings. The young man gathers courage and shouts that he will marry his servant, surprising his siblings. As he leaves the dinner, his siblings decide to accompany him, while his mother remains seated, proud that her son was the only one who had the courage to confront her and sees how he has grown. Upon leaving the mansion, Alice is waiting for him by the carriage, and both brothers bid the Duke a friendly farewell as he heads home. The protagonist is building a house of cards when Alice appears, surprising the boy. The servant tells him that instead of playing, he should be searching for a way to break the spell since his mother gave him a time limit. However, he just wants to get rid of the curse regardless of what happens with the inheritance. That same night, Cuff and Zane are working at the circus. A little boy thanks Cuff for bringing him into the circus since he used to be a thief in his past. He gives the witch a flower and asks her to wait until he grows up to be worthy of her. Zane arrives, telling him he is still too young to seduce a woman. Later, when the witches are alone, Zane tells Cuff that her friend, when she went to the demon realm, gathered a couple of magical objects, and she handed them to Cuff. She says she will tell Alice about it since there might be a clue on how to break the Duke's curse. The wizard then asks her how she would like to live her life as a witch or a human, explaining that if she doesn't use her powers, she can live more peacefully now that she has friends and it will be less dangerous than when she's with him. However, she responds that no matter what she chooses, she wants to be with him. In the demon realm, the leader notices Zane's power to manipulate time through objects. The next day, Cuff visits the Duke and Alice at the mansion and starts using her firepower since she can't do it at the circus. However, the young couple tells her to stop because things are heating up, so she suggests getting into a pool that Zane brought. Alice is the only one who accepts, and both girls get into bikinis, while the Duke tries to pass the time while they have fun. However, he starts getting warmer, and Alice asks him to get into the pool to cool off. Due to the heat, he stumbles and corners the servant against the wall. Both become nervous about the situation and how close they are, so the young man quickly backs away. After refreshing themselves in the pool, Cuff gives the Duke a gift sent by Zane. When he opens the magical box, he gets sucked into a world where his wishes come true. Alice is there dressed as a bunny, and another version of her shows him different rooms in the place, one with many versions of the servant, another where his little sister tells him she's proud of him, and one where he plays the piano in front of thousands of people. When opening the next door, Alice sees that he wants to marry her but stops, and they decide to leave that place. Once outside that world, Alice puts away the box, telling him that she enjoyed seeing what he desires, making the young man happy. The Duke is at the mansion while Alice is teaching him to play mini golf, but she distracts him the whole time by teasing him with insinuations. Meanwhile, Viola asks her brother Walter for help because she wants to practice makeup using his face, as her mother forbade her to do it on herself. Walter agrees, and in her room, Viola finishes applying makeup on him. She also dresses him up and puts on a wig, and the young man likes the result. He devises a plan to win over his brother and become the heir of the family. Viola takes advantage of the opportunity, bringing Walter to her brother, introducing him as a fan who is a servant, and leaves them alone with Alice for their amusement while she goes to find the butler. Despite the Duke not believing that Walter is his fan, he invites him to play golf since he has been practicing with Alice. Although Walter tries to converse with him, he communicates only through written messages to avoid being discovered. While playing golf, the Duke realizes that Walter is not good at it, so he proposes that if he wins in a single shot, they would get married. The young man becomes nervous and confused by Walter's request, and Walter achieves his goal in the game, asking him to fulfill his promise. The Duke informs him that he never agreed and apologizes, stating that his heart already belongs to someone else. Later, the Duke starts to notice that Walter's voice is the same as his younger brother's. Later at the circus, Cuff is practicing for the show, and Zane watches her. At that moment, the little boy Hugo, who also works there, arrives to bring juice to the witch, who he admires. Despite being just a child, Zane becomes jealous of him. Their boss arrives and advises Zane to confess his feelings to Cuff, assuring them that he won't interfere and that they can share their desires when they decide. Both Zane and Cuff are surprised by his words. At night, the Duke is about to have tea served by Alice when everything around him turns dark. The leader of the witches appears in front of him, saying that while he is conscious in that world, in the real world, he is completely unconscious, and Alice tries to wake him up. The witch informs him that she wants to see him to tell him she is looking for a wizard with the power to manipulate time at will, realizing she's referring to Zane. She asks him to convince his friend to use magic for her, but the Duke refuses as he cannot ask Zane, who has been hiding his powers for some reason. Learning his response, she tries to persuade him by mentioning that helping her could break his curse. Meanwhile, Zane recalls the day he met his friend Cuff and reveals that he hasn't used his powers since his parents died when he unsuccessfully tried to save them. In the mansion's hall, the Duke asks if she was the one who cursed him, but the witch responds negatively, revealing that she knows another witch who will visit him soon and may break his curse, but in return, he must convince Zane. Upon regaining consciousness, the Duke tells Alice that Daleth visited him and asked for a favor, mentioning that a witch will visit him soon, and they notice he has a business card with a drawing of an octopus in his hand. During one night, Alice is walking through the mansion hallway in the darkness, but hears a voice telling her that the person she loves will come out of the next room, and she is correct. The Duke emerges from that room, and as they converse, he notices that the servant is acting strangely. She confesses that she can hear the ghost of a bride who apparently can only be heard by her. The ghost tells Alice that despite marrying her beloved, she died falling down the stairs in anger because the ring didn't fit. Since then, she has been waiting for her lover in the afterlife. They try to help the ghost find a perfectly fitting ring so she can rest in peace. The ghost possesses Alice's body to get closer to the Duke, who runs away due to the advances. Later, the ghost exits Alice's body to disappear, wishing happiness to Alice along with the young man and gifting her a bouquet of flowers. The next morning, the Duke and Alice are outside the mansion, waiting in case the witch mentioned by Daleth appears. In the event of her appearance, the young man wanted to banish her as he didn't want to owe a favor to the witch leader, and especially not betray his friend Zane. In the distance, they see someone in a white cloak approaching, claiming to be sent by Daleth, but fainting at that moment. The youths rush to help her and realize she is dehydrated and in the form of an octopus. At the mansion, they place her in a pool, and while conversing, she introduces herself as Amelia. She claims to be able to break his curse, having done it once before. Despite his initial rejection to avoid disappointing Zane, she convinces him to try to break the curse. When she attempts to touch the young man to break the spell, he dodges, citing it as a custom, and warns her to be careful as she might take his life. The witch reassures him that her power is greater. To demonstrate, she covers the entire mansion with water as if it were an ocean, and the young couple takes advantage to explore the place with the fishes. After having fun, Amelia asks the Duke to start undoing his curse, so he extends his hand. At the moment of the attempted touch, a very powerful magic appears, causing distress to the witch. She reveals that the magic is attached to him and claims to know who cursed him: Sade, Daleth's twin sister. Alice thinks that what she read in the book may have involved them, but she remains unsure about why they came to the mansion. Meanwhile, the Duke suspects that the witch leader may want to use Zane's power to bring her sister back to life. In that moment, Amelia falls to the ground, having exhausted almost all her power, and the young couple takes her to the ocean, bidding her farewell cordially. Later, the Duke suggests to Alice that they visit their friends to share what they have discovered. After the events that same night, Cuff tells her friend that she spoke with Viola because she falls in love with older people and may end up losing them prematurely. However, Viola confessed that she prefers to go through tough times herself rather than have the person she loves suffer. Cuff asks Zane if he would be capable of leaving her, to which he responds that he would only do it if it were for her own good. The next day, the Duke and Alice head to the circus to visit their friends. The young man decides to disguise himself to avoid being recognized and especially to avoid contact with people. On the way, they encounter Hugo, who overhears mention of the circus. When asked about Cuff, the boy initially thinks the Duke wants to conquer her, but calms down when told they are looking for her due to the curse. He offers to lead them there. Once at the circus, they find Cuff, who is happy to see them and takes them to a comfortable place to talk. Meanwhile, she informs them that Zane is not present. Later, the Duke takes off his disguise, and due to Hugo's questions about his curse, he shows how he withers a flower. The boy declares that he is not afraid, and at that moment, the circus director arrives. Having witnessed the flower demonstration, he proposes that the Duke join the circus. However, the young man falls, surprised by the suggestion. When the director leaves, he suggests they should at least try it since his curse could make him popular. Alice decides to practice trapeze with Cuff, and Hugo attempts to teach juggling to the Duke, who seems unable to concentrate. After a while, the young man shows what he achieved in his juggling practice, performing it perfectly. Then Cuff arrives carrying Zane, who is in a drunken state, and realizes that their friends have come to visit. Meanwhile, in the demon realm, Daleth is at a tomb where Sharon is buried. At that moment, a witch named Ket arrives, to whom Daleth shows Alice's mother's body. She explains that although she doesn't breathe, her heart still beats. Daleth valued her when they met and wanted to help her resume her life as if nothing happened. She asks Ket to keep the secret and help her bring Zane back to the witch world by going to the human world. After Ket goes to find her girlfriend Tet so they can work together, Daleth remembers her sister hurting her, leaving marks on her face simply for looking identical, since they were twins. The next day, at a confectionery, while Cuff leaves to place an order, the Duke tells Zane that Daleth wants to use his power. Zane responds that the time to leave the city has come because he doesn't want to endanger his friend. However, she overhears them when she returns but pretends not to listen. In the circus evening show, everyone presents their acts while Zane watches from a distance. However, when it's Cuff's turn, two young girls arrive to seduce the witch. Soon, Zane realizes they are witches from the demon realm, along with Daleth. She asks him to return with them or else they will harm Cuff. He reluctantly agrees since the plan was to return once he could say goodbye to his friends. The witch tells him she will come for him in a few days. The next day, the circus is set up in the town, and the Duke is excited to perform for them. Hugo seeks out Cuff, informing her that Zane needs to talk to her and is waiting in a passage in the town. Hugo asks Cuff to make her happy if Zane confesses his feelings, then leaves them alone. Instead of revealing that he is leaving, Zane thanks Cuff for being with him. However, she realizes he wants to leave her and becomes angry and saddened because he doesn't disclose the real reason for his departure. Upset, she tells him they are no longer friends, but he stops her, expressing his love and assuring her that everything he does is to protect her. As the performance is about to begin, a woman dressed in white passes by the Duke and his servant. Cuff arrives, appearing disoriented, and Zane follows her. Unexpectedly, a giant carnivorous plant destroys everything during the circus act, controlled by the witch Ket. Zane realizes that Daleth is behind all this, and the plant follows little Hugo, capturing him. A snake appears, telling the witches that to save Hugo, they must go with her. When Zane is about to use his magic, the Duke uses his curse to wither the carnivorous plant, freeing Hugo and all the circus members who were captured. The witches are surprised, flee the scene, and Zane worries because the leader could attack again. However, Cuff asks him to solve this together without using his power and without destroying the circus, which is essential to them. She runs away, shouting that she will answer his love declaration later. Cuff starts looking for Daleth, climbing onto the roofs of the town. At that moment, another enormous plant threatens the place again, capturing the protagonist this time. However, the circus members manage to save him. Meanwhile, Daleth distracts Zane with an illusion of his friend and seizes the opportunity to endanger the present Cuff. With a powerful gust of wind, Zane knocks the witch down, leaving her hanging by one hand. When Zane realizes his friend is in danger, she asks him not to use his magic. The witch uses the illusion of the young Cuff to plead with him to save her. Realizing that he is the only one who can protect his friend's smile, Zane uses his power to stop time and save Cuff. They seize the moment to catch the witch's accomplices. Before returning to reality, Cuff responds to Zane's love declaration with a kiss. When time starts again, they deceive the people, making them believe it was an illusion from the circus, but the Duke realizes it is not true. While everyone cleans up the mess they cause in the town, a woman in white approaches Alice and the Duke, asking to talk. The Duke realizes it is Daleth, and he confronts her for putting the circus in danger. She explains that thanks to Zane's power, they benefited, and she might help Alice awaken her mother in the future. Alice responds that her mother died in an accident, but the witch insists it's not true, claiming that a man from the mansion, Rob, lied to her. Alice is unsure whether to believe her, and if it is true, it would make her happy. Cuff arrives and hits Daleth, making her mask disappear, revealing her face to everyone. In the evening, everyone gathers in a bar to celebrate the circus's success. The circus director asks Cuff and Zane if they are witches, suspecting it, and paralyzes them. However, he is delighted, and the other circus members are not surprised as they consider themselves strange people. The director reassures them, saying that everyone in the circus is a family, making Cuff happy. He also reveals that he is married to a witch who is an octopus, surprising Alice and the Duke as they know her, and mention that she tried to help them break the spell. Taking advantage of the moment when everyone is together, the witches announce that they are now a couple, making everyone happy for them. Later, Alice and the Duke bid farewell to their friends and return home. After 4 days away from the mansion, the young ones return, and Rob is delighted as he feels lonely. In the main mansion, Walter informs his mother that he has completed all his academic tasks. Due to her cold response, the young man is even more determined to become the heir. Upon leaving the room, he encounters his sister, who is devouring a tower of macarons. Noticing that she doesn't offer him any, he remarks that she has gained weight and suggests that their beloved Rob won't like it if she remains in that condition. Viola decides to go on a diet and start exercising with Walter's help. When Viola is about to give up, her brother motivates her to keep striving, assuring her that this way she will achieve anything she sets her mind to. Viola recalls that when they were children, her brother helped her when she felt sad, just like now. Meanwhile, in the Duke's mansion, Rob is happy about Alice and the Duke's return. He prepares tea for them in a room filled with various artifacts, including some magical objects given to the Duke. When Alice attempts to look at a golden box, Rob gives her a book containing all the illustrations the Duke drew as a child. The young man also presents gifts sent by the circus members and their wizard friends. The maid gives her a gift, coffee beans, while the young man brings a chessboard. The next day, Zane and Cuff are on a date at the zoo. Zane seems somewhat annoyed because Hugo is also with them, and the director took the opportunity to ask them to find more people. Despite this, Zane can't stop thinking about Daleth and what she might be plotting, along with the uncertainty about the awakening of Alice's mother. Cuff interrupts his thoughts, asking him to continue enjoying the afternoon. Later, the little boy expresses his affection for Cuff, explaining that he lacks friends to spend time with and that she takes care of him. They finish the zoo visit, and the boy leaves them alone, crossing paths with Walter, who appears to be heading toward a dark passage. That night, while Zane and Cuff were heading to visit the mansion, they got caught in a snowstorm. They take shelter in a cave, deciding to play to pass the time. Eventually, Cuff asks if Zane has been thinking about Daleth. When he confirms it, she reassures him, saying they will be together. Zane expresses his desire to undo the Duke's spell, but is unsure if his power is sufficient. He considers facing Maid, a powerful witch, as the most challenging part. Now we see Alice and the Duke inside a dream book, where both have the mission to hunt the wolf in the Little Red Riding Hood story. If they succeed, she will grant them a wish. Upon reaching the wolf, who is sleeping, they finally manage to capture it, and due to the absence of its mother, it turns into a puppy. They give it to Little Red Riding Hood, but she doesn't grant them any wishes. The Duke wakes up from the dream and sees Alice sleeping next to him in the library. That night, Walter feels a pain, thinking that his mother always favored his older brother over him. She and Viola want the family heir to be the Duke, and for that reason, his mother always watches out the window of her room, hoping the young man will return home after breaking the spell. However, Walter plans to go to the demon realm as there is a red moon to find out about his brother's curse. Unaware that his mother is watching, he plans to go to the demon realm to investigate his brother's curse. When she leaves, Walter manages to cross the portal through the mirror. At the same time, Alice tells the Duke that she also plans to go to the demon realm to find out if what Daleth told her was true. The Duke decides to accompany her, and both cross the portal through the mirror. When they arrive in the realm, they notice that Walter is also there. However, upon mentioning his name, the witches detect his presence, so Alice is asked to stay with her brother while the Duke distracts the witches. On the way, Walter asks Alice to return home, but she only follows the Duke's orders, who asks her to stay by his side. The young man remembers the maid from childhood and questions why someone like her cannot live in such a dark place. She replies that she is happy being with the Duke and tells him not to misinterpret his brother. However, this causes Walter to become desperate as he compares himself to the Duke. When they finally reach the church where Daleth is, a small wizard appears and steals Alice's necklace. Walter tries to catch him, but the wizard taunts him about being second place in his family, leaving Walter in shock. Later, both chase the wizard to a small house where he hid. After searching and chasing him throughout the house, the young man corners him and realizes they are two twin brothers. The older one instructs the younger to not always obey him blindly, as he can rebel against him. The young wizard returns Alice's necklace, and she thanks him. After resolving the necklace issue, they are back in the church, and Walter asks Alice to stay outside while he tries to enter from another side. Inside the church, Daleth is crying over the scars her sister left on her, but Walter hears her and tells her that he understands. However, without hesitation, she uses her magic to throw him off the chandelier where he was standing. Realizing that he is the Duke's brother, she asks him why he is there, and he replies that unfortunately, he heard everything. Despite knowing he shouldn't sympathize with a witch, he fully understands her situation. Due to his older brother, others have decided what she should do with her life. But Walter came to investigate his brother's curse. He cannot leave a lady crying. The witch blushes and nervously denies being a lady, as she is full of scars and not all like one. However, Walter stops her, saying that despite having scars, she is beautiful and should have more confidence in herself. At that moment, they are interrupted by witches Ket and Tet, who inform the leader that they have captured Alice and the Duke. They quickly close the door since Daleth isn't wearing her mask. Walter tells the witch that to face her scars, she must acknowledge them. He tries to show that she is worth more than his brother. Hearing his advice, the witch gathers courage and reveals her face to all the witches, and everyone congratulates her as they can now see her beauty. Cuff and Zane welcome her and take her to where the girl is, who is looking after a lion that is now part of the circus. Later, both decide to take a stroll through the city, and Viola seizes the opportunity to buy clothes for Cuff, who looks very happy with the dress. She tells the girl that she should consider becoming a designer, but Viola responds that unfortunately, she cannot, as her life is already decided. After finishing their walk, they head to the circus, since the show was about to start. Following the events in the demon realm, the young ones are still there. Daleth releases the Duke and Alice and asks everyone to follow her to show them something. On the way, both Walter and Daleth tease the Duke for being a coward, so it seems the witch sided with the younger brother after helping her face her fear. Still, she also realizes that her heart starts racing every time he looks at her. At the end of the tour, everyone enters a dark room where the witch shows Alice her mother's body, telling her that a man with an eye patch lied to her about her mother. She is under a sleeping curse that her sister, just like the Duke, placed on her. It is challenging to break the curse since her sister was a prodigious witch. Alice tries to take her mother with her, but ends up accepting that the witch should be the one to take care of her. The Duke takes the opportunity to ask about his curse, so Daleth shows them her memories of that day in the mansion. Then Duke is playing with his brother but stops to ask Sharon about Alice. She responds that Alice is in her room with a smile. In the distance, Sade is with Daleth, hidden in the trees observing Sharon. At that moment, Daleth begins to feel overwhelmed and fearful of seeing her sister again. So she dispels the illusion, telling them that she will provide information on another occasion. She asks Walter for permission to visit him and he agrees. After dispelling the illusion, she sends everyone home so Alice and the Duke are left in the mansion, confirming that Sharon is alive. As they walk through the mansion corridor, they believe that Daleth is not as bad a witch as they thought, even thinking that they could become friends. The next day, Alice gives the Duke a gift sent by Zane, a magic lamp. When he rubs the lamp, a genie with the body and face of Alice appears, granting him 3 wishes. For one of his wishes, the young man asks to break the curse and the genie fulfills it. The young man is surprised as it was done easily, but the genie tells him that to lift the curse, he had to pass it on to someone else. Feeling guilty for what the unknown person would endure, he uses his last wish to have the curse back. During the night, while Alice is taking a bath, she thinks about her friends who are now a couple and had their first kiss, something she also wishes for. Then Duke accompanies her outside the mansion as she heads to her room. After conversing, they say their goodbyes, but she feels the urge to kiss him, so she decides to look for him, and when she finds him in the hallway, she writes on the window for him to give her a kiss. She places her hands on the window, moving closer to him, and he also does the same. Finally, they share their first kiss through the glass. After the kiss, Alice runs back to her room. One rainy day, Walter sees Daleth waiting for him outside one of the mansion windows. He invites the witch inside for tea. Once inside, Daleth realizes the mansion is very quiet and she recalls knowing Walter's mother from afar when they were young. Sharon used to bring happiness and fun to the mansion, but after her departure, the atmosphere returned to its former cold state. When Walter leaves to get more tea, Daleth leaves him a letter, asking to meet again later. Meanwhile, in the Duke's mansion, Alice talks to Rob about what Daleth told her regarding him and the lie about her mother. Alice forgives the elderly man, understanding that he did it to protect her. Rob starts telling her about witches, mentioning that they first appeared when the mansion served as the main residence, and the Duke's grandfather, who was very religious, never suspected them. The grandfather hired both him and Sharon, and after the grandfather's death, the witches stopped visiting. The last time he saw them, they were carrying Sharon, but he couldn't do anything due to the conflict caused by the Duke's curse. Alice thanks him for being honest, and as she enters the mansion, Rob stays in the rain, reminiscing about the day the Duke's grandfather helped him when he was on the street. Zane is outside the circus, watching the rain when Daleth appears, telling him that she will collaborate with him from now on to reach her goal. Zane ends up believing her, and she asks for his help to investigate her sister through the registration book she pretended to destroy. At night, Cuff and the Duke celebrate a small second anniversary party for Alice in the mansion. When Alice arrives, the Duke shows her a small cake he made for her with love. Alice thanks him, expressing her wish to stay forever by his side. Cuff interrupts them, giving her a gift from Viola, a dress. She seizes the opportunity to change in front of the young man, and then the 3 of them enjoy the rest of the night. Later, due to the rain, the roof of Alice's room collapses. The Duke offers her to sleep inside the mansion. Ket, the witch working with Daleth, appears, asking if they have seen her. Distracted by the hole in the roof, she proposes to fix it but requests they leave her to work in peace tonight. Alice and the Duke are in their room to rest. The young man suggests she use the bed while he sleeps on the floor. However, during the night, the Duke cannot sleep and notices that Alice still has the flower he once gave her. He goes out to offer Ket something to drink, and she tells him that Daleth has been leading them by force since Sade's absence. Ket believes Daleth lacks the qualities of a leader, thinking she should live as she wishes. Recently, Ket has noticed her interest in Walter, suggesting that if their leader loves him, they could live peacefully among humans. The next day, Ket finishes repairing Alice's room and suggests they call her girlfriend and Daleth for the next pajama party. The maid agrees, making the witch very happy, unintentionally breaking the room's roof again. Zane, Cuff, and Hugo are in the city when some youths intercept them to bother Hugo, his former friends from when he used to steal. After bothering him, they run away and Hugo follows them, finding them lying on the ground. A blonde boy and an old woman attacked them when they tried to steal, and the 2 only defended themselves. Turning around, Hugo realizes those people are no longer there, so he decides to tell Zane about it. On a quiet morning, the Duke is reading a book when he sees a somewhat suggestive image. At that moment, Alice appears, suspecting what he was up to. However, she is surprised to find him on the 3rd floor window, and he explains that it's thanks to a flying broom gifted by Ket. Cuff and Zane visit the Duke to stay with him for a while, as a strange couple has been looking for him. The blonde boy and the old woman that Hugo saw. The director believes is for the Duke to use his time power, so he gave them a vacation to hide. The Duke accepts, considering them as his friends. The Duke asks Zane to speak privately, taking the opportunity to return the registration book he pretended to destroy. Suddenly, Nico, the blonde boy from the city, appears in front of them, while the old woman interrupts Cuff and Alice's work. In the Duke's room, Nico approaches him and manages to touch him, but the Duke's curse has no effect on him. Nico then attacks them, causing the room to spin. After it stops, he introduces himself as Nico, a magician seeking the time-wielding warlock. In the hallway, Cuff tries to defend Alice, but the old woman, Ecchi, uses cigarette smoke to take away the witch's powers and introduces herself as Nico's wife. The Duke asks Zane to listen to the magician's story to understand why he wants to use the warlock's power. Nico explains that he carries the curse of immortality cast by a witch named Maid. Even though he killed her, his curse persists. He reveals that when he was an old man, Maid told him it was too early for humans to use magic, turning him into a child and cursing him with immortality. Later, he found out that Maid cursed the Duke as a child. They decided to confront her, and though they defeated her, Nico survived due to his curse, while his comrades did not. Zane starts to believe him and asks why he needs to use the warlock's power. Nico explains he plans to go back in time before the curse and destroy Maid again with the help of all the magicians. Nico requests them to go to the magic school, where Zane can learn to control his power, and the Duke can learn to use magical weapons. Ecchi also asks Cuff to attend the school to become more powerful. The magicians leave, urging the warlocks and the Duke to assist them at the magic school. The boy calls his friend, who turns into a flying horse holding a carriage. As they fly away, the Duke grabs onto the carriage, expressing his desire not to kill the witch but to accept her without fear, hoping they can become friends. Nico hands the Duke a backpack with information about the school and throws him into the void with a magical parachute. Later, Cuff and Zion leave the mansion as they no longer need to hide after the encounter with the magicians. Additionally, Cuff wants to prepare herself to attend the magic school, become stronger, and protect all their friends. After the events, the Duke decides to go to the magic school along with Zane and Cuff because he agrees with Nico's plan to go back in time, but disagrees with getting rid of Maid. He wants to talk to the magician about it. Later, as they read the servant registry book, which is actually Sharon's diary, they find a page where she wrote about meeting Maid. Maid claimed to be a nun with knowledge of divination, as she could predict Sharon's past. Although they assume they had a good relationship, they don't understand why she cursed her. While contemplating what Sharon wrote, the Duke believes that maybe the witch had a special power similar to Zane's, but she could read minds. In the main mansion, Daleth is once again among the trees with Ket, observing Walter, who is unaware of her presence. However, Viola notices and kindly asks her to spend time together. Viola invites her into the mansion for tea. Viola seizes the moment to apply makeup and cut Daleth's hair, as she had visited her brother and noticed Daleth's interest in him. Viola thinks Walter still needs to mature. Viola, with her friendly personality, asks if the witch hates her face since she never looks in the mirror. Daleth responds that she hates her scars because they don't disappear. Viola tries to cheer her up by suggesting to hide them with makeup. However, Daleth can't stop thinking about the moment her sister ruined her face and became emotional. Seeing her sad, Viola hugs her to comfort her. After finishing her makeup, they go to see Walter, but he doesn't notice the change in Daleth. She leaves and both her sister and Ket become upset with Walter. Daleth turns around to say goodbye to him and smiles, leaving him astonished as it's the first time he has seen her smile. At night, Viola visits her brother, teasing him about touching Alice. However, she realizes he's not paying attention and suspects he's hiding something. Viola tries to find out by searching through his things. She discovers the backpack left by the magician containing a beautiful dress. Walter tries to make excuses, but Cuff arrives and unintentionally mentions the magic school in front of Viola. Excited, Viola shows the dress to the butler and apologizes to the Duke for speaking in front of his sister. However, Viola believes it's time to tell them that they are witches. Later, everyone travels by train to the magic school. Walter joins them as he wants to investigate his brother's curse. In reality, his mother asked him to accompany his sister and gain knowledge, common among nobles. Daleth learns that Walter is going on a journey, so she decides to follow him to make sure he's safe. On the train, Cuff and Zane inform Viola that they are witches, but she is not surprised as she entered the mansion through the second-floor window. After the train journey, a long path leads them to the school, where Nico and Ecchi are waiting. Inside the school, Nico introduces the other students, 4 in total, each with different powers. He also introduces the other professor, the man who turned into a horse in the Duke's mansion. Later, while the Duke and Walter take a bath, the younger brother explains the reason for attending the magic school and reveals his plan to go back in time to prevent Maid from cursing them. Meanwhile, Daleth spies on Walter from outside the school, suspecting that he met another woman. After all this, when Cuff finishes her bath, Ecchi is waiting for her to begin her training since the magician will be her teacher and promised to make her even more powerful. Her trainer creates a water duplicate of Cuff and challenges her to defeat it without using her powers. Despite destroying it several times, the figure reforms, leaving the witch almost drained of energy until her double finally overpowers her. Ecchi realizes that Cuff overthinks and doesn't use her mind effectively in the fight, which is what she needs to work on to enhance her power. The next day, Daleth manages to break the barrier protecting the school. After theoretical classes with a third teacher, where everyone seemed bored, they continue with their classes with Professor Ecchi. She tells them that their training will be merciless, and she gives each one a magical tool they must discover the function of. Once they figure it out, they can rest. During the training, Ecchi attacks everyone with her water powers while students try to understand their tool's functions. When a stream of water is about to attack Viola, Walter stands in front of her and stops the water with a magical tool, which turns out to be a hilt that transforms into a sword with magic. Ecchi congratulates the young man and rewards him by letting him keep the magical item. At the door, Nico watches them. When he turns around, he sees a woman in white passing through the school hallway and immediately thinks it's Sade. Daleth is in the school library, but Nico, following her, mistakes her for Sade. The witch decides to play along to gather information about the place. The magician confronts her, revealing that it's impossible for her to still be alive after he destroyed her. Due to the curse he gave her, he cannot age alongside his wife. The witch tries to put him to sleep with her power through an illusion, but Ecchi appears, dispelling the illusion. Both of them claim to fight her. At that moment, Ket arrives, who had lost sight of her leader. Seeing that they are confronting each other in that place, Nico requests the evacuation of his students. Hearing this, Daleth realizes it's a magic school attended by Walter, so she decides to confess that she is not Sade, but her sister. Later, Daleth and Ket join the classes with the others during Nico's class. He reveals that their class will be about Sade, where everyone will provide information about her to help with their curses. That night, Zane proposes to the Duke, Alice, and Daleth to try going back to the past as practice, since controlling his power is easier in that place, though he still needs improvement. Before the witch crosses the portal, the young man asks if her sister had the power to read minds, to which she replies that she cannot tell him as she is also cursed by Sade. After passing through the portal, they return to the mansion before the Duke is cursed, but everyone gets separated when crossing the portal. Zane is behind the trees, assuming he sees Daleth, but the woman turns around, revealing herself to be Sade. She realizes that the wizard comes from the future. Meanwhile, Daleth is floating above the mansion, confirming the Duke's statement. Alice and the Duke hide from the mansion's servants, so they cannot see them, with their hat flies caught by an adult man dressed in a suit, Victor, the Duke's grandfather. Meanwhile, Sade talks to Zane about a past love, trying to read his mind. She reveals that once in her life she fell in love, but someone interfered with her path. At that moment, she tries to attack the wizard, but is rescued by Daleth, who asks him to open a portal while she distracts her sister. Sade realizes that her sister is also there and that in the future, she stopped loving her. When the Duke says goodbye to his grandfather, something begins to suck them into a portal. It's Zane, who asks them to leave as Sade has realized their presence. As Daleth crosses the portal, Sade appears behind her, trying to follow, but her sister stops her. As the portal closes, the witch manages to see Alice. After returning from the past, the Duke takes a bath where he appears frustrated, unsure if it's possible to talk to Sade and become friends, as she is genuinely dark and evil. Bocchan, a guy cursed since childhood, dodging happiness like you dodging responsibilities, thinking one day fate's gonna cut him some slack. But nah, Like's got other plans. He's out here making friends, building bonds, and fighting battles, but deep down, he's just another dude carrying way too much emotional baggage, hoping one day he can break free. No easy paths, just heartbreak, hard choices, and a whole lotta, maybe someday, energy. If you think this is another tragic love story, stick around. This one's got curses, witches, and enough drama to make your favorite romance anime look basic. Another long intro. Hit that like button. Maybe next time we'll skip it. The story picks up with Cuff dragging herself through the halls of the magical wizardry school, barely keeping her eyes open. The other students whisper about her weird habit, falling asleep while walking. Turns out, there's a reason for it. She's been training like crazy under Ecchi, staying up all night to push herself past her limits. Then the focus shifts. It's magic practice time and everyone's hard at work. But Cuff isn't just training, she's fighting like her life depends on it. Against Ecchi, she goes all out, determined to get stronger, to burn brighter than ever. No holding back. Meanwhile, Daleth makes a big decision. She's heading back to the underworld. But first, she needs something from Nico. Her request is a book. Not just any book, but one that can turn a witch into a human. She lets herself daydream for a moment, imagining what life would be like as a human, picturing herself marrying Walter. But before she can get too lost in her fantasy, Walter suddenly shows up, catching her completely off guard. The moment Walter appears, Daleth completely loses her composure. One second, she's lost in her own fantasy, picturing a perfect future, and the next, she's face to face with the man she was just daydreaming about. Panic sets in. Words fail her. Instead of sticking around and making a fool of herself, she mutters a quick excuse and bolts, disappearing before Walter can even process what just happened. Meanwhile, training at the wizardry school finally comes to an end. Bocchan, Alice, Cuff, and Zane, worn out from the intense practice, make their way back home. The journey is quiet, exhaustion hanging over them like a heavy cloud. But when Bocchan and Alice step inside, all fatigue vanishes in an instant. Standing there, waiting for them is Alice's mother, Sharon Lendrot. Her sudden visit is unexpected, but not unwelcome. Just as night falls, the three of them gather together and Sharon begins to tell stories from her past. She talks about her time at the mansion, how she ended up working as a maid, and the experiences that shaped her. Then the conversation takes a turn. She reveals the harsh truth. Alice's father abandoned their family, choosing to run away and build a new life with another woman. The weight of her words lingers in the air, heavy and unshakable. Just as Sharon prepares to leave, Bocchan steps forward. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't waver. Looking straight at Alice, he makes a bold declaration. He will never betray her. No matter what happens, no matter what challenges come their way, he promises to always stand by her side. Sharon doesn't come back empty-handed. She's more than just a surprise visitor. She's a walking time bomb, packed with clones ready to be unleashed whenever she sees fit. One of them ends up locked in a cage where Rob, ever the practical one, casually names it Rob Ayu. Another clone wastes no time stirring up chaos, engaging Walter in a full-blown duel right in the hallway of the main mansion. Meanwhile, yet another clone makes its way to Gemini, its mission clear: capture the Witch of Time. But things don't go as planned, and soon it's locked in a heated battle with Kaf. For most, Sharon's return is unexpected, but for Gerbera, it's downright unsettling. She stares at Sharon, struggling to believe what she's seeing. It's been years, decades even, since Sharon left, yet she hasn't aged a single day. In fact, Gerbera, who should be younger, now looks older. It's too much to process at once. She needs time, she announces, before stepping away to gather her thoughts. With Gerbera still reeling, Sharon moves on to something less complicated, bonding time with Viola and the other maids. Walter, ever persistent, tries to join in, even going as far as donning full battle attire in an attempt to insert himself into the situation. But it's no use. He's left on the sidelines, completely ignored. Elsewhere, another clone is on the move. This one heads straight for Daleth, who has already returned to the underworld. The difference between her and her sister couldn't be more obvious. Where Sharon thrives on chaos and manipulation, Daleth rules with a softer touch. It's no surprise then that under her leadership, the underworld seems far more peaceful, almost happy. For all of Sade's twisted schemes, nothing comes close to the cruelty she has inflicted on Daleth. There's something particularly venomous in the way she treats her own sister, like she takes a special kind of pleasure in making her suffer. Meanwhile, Rabeo doesn't just stir up trouble, it drops a bombshell on Alice. The truth is brutal. Alice, without even realizing it, was the reason Sharon went to sleep in the first place. She was weak as a child, constantly sick, her condition seemingly hopeless. Sharon, desperate to save her daughter, made an unthinkable trade, herself for Alice's life. Sade, true to her word, pulled Alice from the brink, but at a cost. She played the long game, keeping Sharon trapped for years. The weight of this revelation hits Alice hard. She doesn't know how to process it. But Rabida isn't done yet. It wreaks havoc, not just on the mind of Alice, but on the entire detached estate. For once, Bocchan's curse actually works in his favor. He steps in and puts an end to Rabida before things spiral even further out of control. In the aftermath, he finds Alice shaken and lost in her thoughts. So if he does what he can, he sits at the piano and plays for her, offering comfort in the only way he knows how. No words, no explanations, just music filling the space between them. The notes drift through the room, but his mind is elsewhere. His curse could kill Sade. That realization lingers, heavy and unsettling. Sade cursed both him and Nico, but in doing so, she weakened herself. It doesn't add up. Someone like her wouldn't make mistakes. Everything she does is deliberate. Nothing about this is normal. Zane drops off another bag of tricks for Bocchan and Alice. After the chaos of last time, common sense says Bocchan should think twice before diving in. He doesn't. Curiosity wins. One by one, they test out the strange items inside. A love potion goes first, but it proves completely useless. Turns out it has no effect on someone already in love. Next comes something even more ridiculous, a body switching tool. The logic behind it is simple. If they switch bodies, they can finally touch each other without the curse of Bocchan getting in the way. It's absurd. It's embarrassing. But that doesn't stop them from trying. Gerbera, meanwhile, takes slow, careful steps toward accepting the return of Sharon. At first, she keeps her distance. Then, after Sharon visits her sister, something shifts. Old memories stir. Words spoken long ago resurface. She remembers saying she loves Sharon. She remembers calling her a friend, the only friend she ever had. The past continues to unfold. Her marriage to a man who meant well but was always sickly. A life filled with duty but not warmth. Children she could never hold, affection she could never show. A constant aching loneliness. She needs Sharon more than she is willing to admit. Maybe more than Sharon needs her. Daleth remains fixated on the idea of becoming human for Walter. The thought consumes her. She takes a drastic step, appointing Kido as her successor. The reaction is immediate. Kido is horrified. Daleth doesn't care. She has bigger concerns. The final step in her transformation spell remains a mystery, and she turns to Kido and Tedo for answers. The solution is painfully simple, a kiss, but none of them fully understand what that means. The frustration grows. She hates this job. She hates the responsibility. But the truth is undeniable. She's good at it. People respect her. The underworld thrives under her leadership. None of that matters. She wants out. The obsession of Walter with cross-dressing is getting worse. What started as a one-time thing has become a full-blown habit, and Viola is having way too much fun encouraging it. This time, she pushes him to take it even further. If he wants to sneak out and see Circus Gemini, he needs a disguise. Gerbera has already banned him from leaving the mansion, but Viola has the perfect solution. Dress up, blend in, and no one will suspect a thing. Walter hesitates for all of 2 seconds before giving in. The plan works. He gets out unnoticed, enjoys the show, and everything seems to be going smoothly. Then on his way back, things take a turn. The town's notorious pickpocket strikes, making Walter his latest victim. It's humiliating, but with Kak's help, he tracks the thief down and delivers justice. For once, he actually does something right. That little victory buys him some time, at least one more day before his mother inevitably finds another reason to be angry with him. Meanwhile, Viola and Rob finally interact again after a long time apart. The Duke, still recovering, sends her off to speak with Rob, and she finds the old butler fast asleep. Curiosity takes over. She spots his eye patch and decides to take a peek underneath. Bad idea. Rob wakes up and catches her in the act. He doesn't get mad, but he does explain. He lost his eye in a fight. That only makes Viola more interested. Her gaze drifts to a music box nearby, but the moment she reaches for it, Rob's reaction changes. He doesn't want her touching it. That just makes her more suspicious. She notices the inscription on the bottom, and her mind jumps to the worst conclusions. But the truth is something else entirely. The music box was a gift from Victor to his wife. A sweet, sentimental present. One that, unfortunately, played a direct role in her death. Even in a world filled with magic and danger, bad driving remains the ultimate killer. Liz arrives at the mansion on a rainy night. From the moment she steps through the door, something feels off. The atmosphere shifts. The air turns heavy. There's something unnatural about her presence. Alice notices at first that familiar chill running down her spine. Her sixth sense flares to life. The realization settles in. This isn't just an ordinary visit. Liz is Victor's wife and the grandmother of Bocchan. She carries herself with a grace that feels oddly familiar. There's something about her, something that reminds him of Sharon. The resemblance is more than just appearance. Thanks to Zane, Bocchan can now share Alice's ability to see these visitors. He never expected to meet his grandmother like this. The moment is strange, almost surreal. Then, before he can fully take it in, Victor appears. Victor doesn't speak right away. He lingers, taking his time, his gaze sweeping over the mansion. A house filled with memories, a place he hasn't truly been in for years. Then finally, the past starts to unfold. Sharon was cursed, but the full reason remains unknown. That wasn't the first time Sade changed everything. Long before that, she made a deal with Victor. Sade doesn't need to ask what he wants. She already knows. She can read minds whether she wants to or not. She sees his desperation, his longing. More than anything, Victor wants to see his wife again. Sade offers him exactly that. When his life ends, she will ensure that he doesn't fade into nothingness. He will remain a ghost, free to travel the world with Liz as they had always dreamed. But there's a price. 20 years of his life. The exact details of his fate, she claims, are beyond even her knowledge. Victor doesn't hesitate. He accepts the deal without a second thought. The decision is instant. No fear, no doubt. And so it begins. A deal unlike any other. Not just a contract. Not just a transaction. Something stranger. Something far more complicated. The father of Sade in Daleth was never generous, but there was one exception. The nun outfit, her only gift from him. A reminder of something long past, a piece of her that remains unchanged. Then Victor comes along. At first, he is nothing more than a curiosity, something to observe from a distance. But curiosity turns into interest. Interest turns into something deeper. The arrival of Sharon changes everything. Alice is with her, but it is Sharon who shifts the balance. Feelings of Victor become clear. He loves Sharon. That realization cuts deep. Loving Sharon means he never loved her. That alone is enough. Falling for a human was never part of the plan. Even the Queen of Witches cannot control her own heart. Bocchan watches his grandfather and recognizes something familiar. He and Victor are more alike than he ever realized. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. His father remains a shadowy figure, barely present, but the truth is clear. Bocchan is his true heir. The same kindness runs through them both, a kindness that sometimes becomes a flaw. The reason Sade cursed him remains uncertain. Victor and Alice may have been out of reach, but the logic doesn't quite add up. None of it makes complete sense. Despite everything, Bocchan doesn't hold anger towards Sade. He doesn't seek revenge. He feels only empathy. Liz delivers the final piece of the contract. There is a rule, one they cannot break. They can never visit the same place twice. Their time at the mansion is over, but that doesn't matter. The world is vast. A place is just a place. They have time, plenty of it. Daleth is still pining over Walter just as hopelessly as ever. No matter what she does, her thoughts keep circling back to him. This time, she's spending time with Amelia, the witchy octopus, and the wife of the Gemini ringmaster. The conversation turns to Daleth's transformation spell. She needs a mermaid scale to complete it. Amelia knows just the place. She takes Daleth to Atlantis, where things don't go quite as planned. What starts as a simple trip quickly turns into something else. They find themselves in the middle of an arm wrestling tournament, forced to face each other in a match neither of them wants to win. Both try to lose on purpose. Neither wants to offend the other. It's ridiculous. To make things even more absurd, Daleth refuses to use her right hand, the one Walter once held. She holds onto that moment like it's sacred. That resolve lasts right up until she forgets and accidentally switches hands mid-match. Meanwhile, Viola drops by the detached estate with a new mission. Daleth wants a new outfit. She's tired of being mistaken for Sade, but at the same time, she refuses to throw away the only gift her father ever gave her. Alice gets to work, and the result is striking. A black man's habit, bold and undeniably eye-catching. If she wanted to leave an impression on Walter, this would do the trick. But Walter isn't exactly one to be outdone. Whatever Daleth was hoping to achieve, his own outfit ends up making an even bigger impression on her. Later, another unexpected visitor arrives. Evelyn, Bocchan's senior from sorcery school, swings by with a supposed purpose, writing a report on one of her juniors. That excuse barely holds up. The real reason is obvious. She's here to tease Bocchan. With a smirk and far too much amusement, she lets slip what Ecchi and Nico have been up to. Every day they're in the woods, training relentlessly. The goal is clear. The fight against Maid is coming, and they're preparing for the showdown. The night of the dance party arrives, filling the mansion with music, laughter, and an endless stream of elegantly dressed guests. Gerbera, caught up in overseeing every detail, has no time to spare for her exiled eldest son. The event moves forward without her paying him any mind. Sharon and Alice slip away for a moment, finding a quiet corner to catch up. Their conversation is soft, filled with warmth and memories only they share. Across the ballroom, Walter, back in his usual attire, effortlessly commands attention. The young ladies flock to him, drawn in by his natural charm. He smiles, he flirts, he plays the part perfectly. It's all harmless fun. But when Daleth arrives, the sight of him surrounded by admirers stops her in her tracks. A sinking feeling settles in. Before she can dwell too much, Viola takes it upon herself to intervene. With her usual enthusiasm and complete lack of subtlety, she pushes Daleth to stop hesitating. If she wants Walter to know how she feels, she needs to say it. No more second guessing. No more waiting for the right moment. Walter isn't blind. He likely already knows. But that doesn't mean she should stay silent. Meanwhile, Bocchan has his own troubles. Another tense encounter with his childhood friend Philip unfolds. Old wounds just beneath the surface. Elsewhere, Daleth, now wearing a borrowed party dress, stands on the rooftop, lost in thought. The next step is clear, but taking it is another matter. Doubt lingers. Viola insists she has nothing to worry about, that Walter isn't going anywhere. But confidence has never been Daleth's strong suit. Viola, for all her energy and determination, isn't exactly an expert in romance. Her understanding of relationships is questionable at best, and the only pairing she's ever fully entertained is utterly ridiculous. That doesn't stop her from giving advice anyway. It never has. The grand ball at the main mansion is in full swing. Music fills the air, elegant guests move across the dance floor, and everything is set for a perfect evening. Viola has arranged for Bocchan to be present, but there's one condition. Gerbera will only allow it if he's completely sealed inside a suit of armor. Surprisingly, it works. His curse is contained. It turns out to be a good thing he's there. When the spotlight turns to Viola for her violent performance, everything goes wrong. She freezes. Her confidence vanishes in an instant. The audience waits, expecting her to start playing, but she stands there, unable to move. Then, before the moment can stretch into disaster, Bocchan steps in. Despite the heavy armor, he makes his way to the grand piano and starts playing. Moving his fingers across the keys in that suit can't be easy, but he manages. The guests assume it's a performance trick, something staged for entertainment. The distraction works. Viola snaps out of her stupor, regains her focus, and picks up her violin. Meanwhile, Walter and Daleth continue to prove why they are the best romance in the series. The chemistry between them is undeniable. Walter is charming in a way that shouldn't work but does. Awkward, yet effortlessly gallant. His easy confidence shines through, but when it comes to Daleth, there's something more. A softness. A sincerity. Bocchan casually mentions that Daleth is somewhere on the grounds too shy to come out. That's all Walter needs to hear. He doesn't hesitate. He sets off immediately, determined to find her. Eventually, he does. She's on the rooftop, lost in her own thoughts. And then the moment unfolds. A musical number, just the two of them. It's quiet, heartfelt, something unspoken passing between them. Misfits in their own ways, but together, something just clicks. They don't need words. The music says enough. Daleth makes her request. A kiss. Simple, direct, and meant for later. Part of her ritual to finally become human. Walter doesn't just agree. He raises the stakes. Instead of a kiss, he offers a marriage proposal. No hesitation, no second guessing. Just pure, reckless confidence. Gerbera's stance on Bocchan marrying Alice is already well established. She doesn't just disapprove, she refuses to even consider it. Alice is too low in station despite being the daughter of her closest friend. If that's a reaction to Alice, Walter bringing home a witch, ex or not, will go over about as well as setting fire to the mansion. Walter wants to claim his brother's place as heir. He's desperate for it. But if his mother won't accept Alice, there's no chance she'll accept Daleth. The night isn't over yet. A surprise guest arrives at the ball. Nico-sensei. Off-duty, just Nico. He's here for exactly the reason the Duke expects. He's ready. In 1 week, they return to the past. The confrontation with Maid is coming. Nico has a plan. A way to remove the Duke's curse. Bocchan listens, but his thoughts are elsewhere. He has his own plans for Maid, his own ideas about how this should go. His approach is different, maybe even naive, but that's just what he is. Too kind for his own good, always putting others before himself. Even now, when he finally has a reason to be selfish, he refuses. Bocchan's kindness runs deep, even when it shouldn't. Nowhere is that clearer than in his relationship with Gerbera. No matter what her reasons were, no matter how much guilt she carries, the truth doesn't change. She has been cruel to him. She banished him. She labeled him a Shinigami. She cut him off emotionally, leaving him isolated for years. There was no warmth, no comfort, nothing a child should expect from a mother. But Bocchan doesn't hold on to resentment. He should. Anyone else would. Instead, he forgives too easily. Even after everything, his biggest goal isn't revenge or proving her wrong. It's winning back her approval. If he can break his curse, she'll welcome him back. That's what he believes. That's what drives him forward. But that's not how it should be. He shouldn't have to break a curse just to be accepted as her son. That should have never been in question. Nico swings by to gather everyone. The time has come. The big departure is just around the corner. He lays out the plan, giving Zane a way out. Once the time portal is open, Zane can step back. He'll be the first one Sade targets, and if he withdraws, he might avoid the worst of it. Zane doesn't even consider it. The offer is there, but he ignores it completely. He's going. End of discussion. Everyone, except Daleth, assembles at the mansion on the eve of their departure. The atmosphere is tense, but the night still finds its moments of normalcy. The girls pile into the shack of Alice for a sleepover, while the guys settle in the parlor. Walter, ever the enigma, reveals an absolutely bizarre choice in seated posture. No one questions it, but they probably should. Viola, ever hopeful, waits for some juicy romance talk. She gets nothing. Her night gets even worse when she accidentally exposes a massive gap in her own knowledge. Somehow, despite everything, she has no idea that her own brother is the prince Alice sees in her dreams. Kath, meanwhile, gets an unexpected education. She learns about Age. The reaction is priceless. Rob, surrounded by what are effectively his kids, decides to check something off his personal list, a pillow fight. It's something he's always wanted to do. The battle begins, but his energy doesn't last. 10 seconds in, and he's out cold. No stamina. Bocchan and Alice take a different approach. They build a mountain of pillows between them, just big enough to safely share. It's ridiculous, but it works. Then just before the night ends, Bocchan turns to Rob. He has a question, a big one. He needs advice on how to propose. There's really only one person he can ask. No one understands the reality of the dream of Bocchan better than Rob. He knows how impossible it is. He's known from the start, but he doesn't have the heart to say it out loud. That's the unspoken truth hanging over everything. The curse isn't just some minor inconvenience. Breaking it won't be easy. It won't be simple. But that's only half the problem. Bocchan's reasons for wanting to break it are complicated. Two dreams drive him forward, reclaiming his place as the heir and marrying Alice. The two don't fit together. One contradicts the other. Bocchan isn't blind to this. He might be kind. He might even be naive. But he isn't a fool. He knows what he's up against. Alice knows it even more. She always has. Then at the last moment, Daleth arrives. Late as always, shy as always, and somehow she ends up being the one to give the final pep talk. She's not here to kill her sister. No one would blame her if she was, but that's not what this is about. This is about Alice. This is about all of them. Everyone is relying on Bocchan to do the impossible, to convince Sade to lift the curse. He is the grandson of Victor. Victor was the man Sade loved. Maybe that's the way in. Maybe that's his only chance. Or maybe that's the reason she cursed him in the first place. Nico and Bocchan make sense as allies. Both of them are trapped by Sade's curses, unable to live the lives they want. Both of them dream of something simple, growing old while holding hands with the one they love. And both of them know that as things stand, that dream is impossible. But there's a problem. This isn't a battle they can win. Even if they could defeat Sade, it wouldn't give them what they need. Nico already tried that. He fought her. He killed her. And yet, the curse remained. The only real option left is persuasion. If Sade doesn't lift the curses willingly, nothing changes. Forcing her into it is almost out of the question. That makes everything more complicated. Sade already lost the one thing she wanted, Victor. After that, nothing else seemed to matter. Cursing people isn't just something she does. It's the only thing that still seems to bring her any satisfaction. Bocchan talks about wanting to be her friend, but that assumes she even wants any more friends after Victor and Sharon. Despite all of that, this is Nico's plan A. Not because it's a good plan, not because it's likely to work, but because there's no other clear way forward. He splits the group into 3 teams. The good cop team, with Bocchan at the lead, heads into the past with Flea as a bodyguard. Their goal is to talk to Sade, to reason with her before things escalate. The bad cop team, led by Nico himself, stays in the shadows, waiting for the moment things go south. If reasoning with Sade fails, they step in. And then there's the last group, Plan C, wildcard team, thrown together just in case everything goes completely off the rails. They aren't the first choice. They aren't even the second choice. They're the backup for the backup. They're only if things get so bad that nothing else matters. Zane takes the lead when the first group, Bocchan, Alice, Walter, and Daleth, jumps back in time. The moment they arrive, everything is tense. They've landed right after Bocchan was cursed, right in the middle of the chaos. Zane wastes no time. He starts a careful game of cat and mouse with Sade, keeping her attention locked on him. She makes her move fast. A deal. She offers to remove every curse if he hands over his time magic. Just one signature and it's done. No more suffering. No more fighting. He refuses. The selfish reasons would have been enough. But that's not why he says no. He knows exactly what Sade would do with that power. Letting her loose on the world with time magic would be a disaster. It would be reckless, irresponsible. He won't be the one to make that mistake. Alice tries next. She goes for something different. No tricks, no arguments, just a bear hug and a guilt trip. Bocchan follows with honesty and humility. If there's a way to reach Sade, it has to be through emotion. None of it works. Nothing they say seems to get through to her. Not even the promise of escaping her own impending death holds much weight. Maybe she believes them, maybe she doesn't. Either way, it doesn't matter. Victor is gone. Without him, there's nothing left to fight for. Eventually, Sade makes her move. She lets the past version of Daleth loose, ordering her to drive them away. Zane leads Sade off, trying his own form of persuasion while keeping her distracted. Walter steps up. Daleth's attack is illusion-based and someone has to take the hit. He volunteers without hesitation. Doesn't matter which version of Daleth this is. She's still the woman he loves. Fighting her isn't an option. Past Daleth is exactly what anyone would expect. Unstable, desperate, completely under the control of Sade. Present Daleth, though, has her own reason for wanting this plan to work. If Sade reclaims her place as the boss witch, then Daleth is free. Free to finally live as a human. Free to have the life she wants. Free to be with Walter. Sade has to be convinced. There is no other way. Killing her won't change anything. Even if they manage to take her down, the curses stay. Nothing improves. The only way forward is persuasion. But persuasion is nearly impossible. Sade is selfish to the core. There's no clear benefit for her in changing. No reason to listen. No reason to stop. Appealing to her conscience is the only option, but that's a long shot at best. Zane carries most of the burden. He's not just their transportation, he's their frontline defense. No matter what this looks like, it's still a fight. The limitations of his magic have never been clearer. Time magic is powerful, but it's not a weapon. He can stop Sade in her tracks, but that doesn't accomplish anything. He can't keep her frozen forever. He's not the type to strike down someone who's helpless. Someone like Sade with his power would be terrifying. In his hands, all it does is buy him time. Meanwhile, Walter emerges from the illusion of Daleth drained but still standing. The experience leaves him rattled, but it does something else too. It proves something. His feelings for Daleth's future self are real, seeing that shakes something in past Daleth. For so long, she believed she was worthless, nothing more than a tool for Sade. But now the cracks begin to form. She's another in a long line of people Sade has broken, and yet, like the others, she still holds on to hope. She still wants to believe in her. One more chance. The decision of past Daleth to stand down shifts the tide. The others finally get their chance to move. But before the battle escalates, Walter's Daleth takes one last precaution. Without hesitation, she sends him back to the future, making sure he's safe before things spiral further out of control. That still leaves Sade. She waits. She watches. Zane is running out of energy, and she knows it. Time magic is powerful, but isn't endless. The longer he fights, the weaker he gets. And when the moment comes, she strikes. The attack is swift, brutal. Zane doesn't stand a chance. She beats him down without effort, leaving him completely outmatched. Flea doesn't hesitate. He jumps in before Sade can finish what she started. Unlike Zane, he's not worn down. He's not out of options. He's one of the most powerful wizards alive, and he proves it in seconds. He blasts Sade back, launching her a safe distance away. She doesn't react the way anyone expects. No rage, no immediate counterattack. Instead, she simply waits, lounging off to the side, smoking a hookah as if she has all the time in the world. Flea takes advantage of the break. He throws a barrier spell over Bocchan, buying him and Alice enough time to carry Zane back to the future. Before they leave, Alice takes a brief moment for herself, just a quick self-feel, because, well, habits die hard. Then, without further delay, they disappear. Walter, Alice, and the others remain. The so-called B team steps forward. The name is misleading. They aren't second-rate, and they aren't here as backups. This fight belongs to them now. If there is any hope left in all of this, it's a small but noticeable shift in Sade. She's questioning things, thinking back. The reason she cursed Bocchan has never fully made sense. Unless she truly lost herself after the death of Victor, there was no real logic behind it. Sade wants to be convinced. At least part of her does. But another part refuses to trust anyone. The only person she ever put her faith in was Victor, and he's gone. She sees things in Bocchan that remind her of him. His kindness, his sincerity, his stubbornness. But unlike Victor, Bocchan doesn't wear two faces. He doesn't hide behind deception like most people do. Still, that isn't enough. Bocchan isn't some saint, and he isn't going to win her over with just words. She knows Nico's real intentions. He's here to save his friend, but he's also here because he hates her. She knows he wants to send her to hell. She can see it clear as day. But then, he says something that shakes her. It doesn't matter what she's done. It doesn't matter how much pain she's caused. For the sake of his friend, Nico is willing to forgive. That breaks something in her. Her mind spirals. She doesn't know whether to believe him or not. She doesn't know if she even wants to. The doubt, the confusion, it all boils over. And then she snaps. Her power surges, spilling out in waves so intense that even Alice, far from the center of it all, feels it. She unleashes everything, losing herself in the madness. Everyone here has someone who loves them. Everyone except her. That's the thought that consumes her. That's the thing she can't escape. If she doesn't have anyone, then why should they? She's ready to tear everything apart. Flea arrives to help, but he takes a serious hit. The damage is bad, but he's still standing. Nico refuses to let anyone else interfere. He's done waiting. This ends now. Then, for the first time, Sade's past begins to unfold. She was different from the start. Too powerful, too gifted. Even among witches, she stood apart. At first, they admired her. Then they feared her. When she developed the ability to read minds, everything changed. Daleth was the first to know. She was shocked, but not afraid. But when their parents and the other witches found out, it was different. They kept their distance. One by one, they pulled away. Everyone. Except one. Little by little, Sade became something else. The fear that surrounded her turned into power. The isolation twisted into something darker. She was no longer just a witch. She was the new queen of witches, a ruler feared by all, a force that no one dared to cross. She made sure of that. Her own sister suffered the most. Daleth became a tool, a living reminder of what happened to those who disobeyed. Love, kindness, trust, none of it mattered anymore. Those things only made people weak. She had no use for them. But power can only carry someone so far. Nico sees his chance. Sade is distracted, caught in the weight of her own past. He strikes, landing a heavy attack. She recovers, but just barely. Stubborn as ever, she refuses to go down. But her body has reached its limit. Nico prepares for the final blow. This is it, the end. But before he can strike, Bocchan stops him. And in that moment, something changes. For the first time, they get through to her. The walls around her mind crack, just enough to let something in. She listens. She hesitates. She allows herself, even for a second, to trust them. But the doubt lingers. Then before she can decide, she starts to fade. Her power spirals out of control, breaking free, consuming everything. A surge of chaos tears through the space around them, threatening to send everyone straight to hell. Now it's the others' turn to act. The remaining team jumps into the past to help. Alice is among them. When they arrive, the battlefield is in ruins. A complete disaster. They waste no time in opening his Maid, a way in to save Bocchan and the others. They brace for another fight, expecting the worst. But instead of Sade, they find something else. A chasm. A deep, dark abyss. Then Alice gets an idea. She makes a move no one else dares to try. She enters the mind of Sade. Inside, she sees everything. The truth behind Sade. The memories, the regrets, the pieces of a life shattered beyond repair. Meanwhile, the others manage to find Bocchan. They bring him up to speed fast. Alice has gone inside Sade to understand what's really going on. And then deep within that space, Alice finally finds her. Sade isn't fighting anymore. She's waiting, and Alice doesn't waste time. She tells her the truth. She tells her what she's been blind to all along. Sade is exactly like Bocchan. Sade finally understands. The reason she cursed Bocchan wasn't because of hatred or malice. It was loneliness. She wanted a friend, someone who felt the same emptiness she did, someone who understood what it meant to be completely alone. But realization isn't the same as redemption. The guilt is overwhelming. Even now, after everything, after seeing that people want to befriend her, she still doesn't trust them. She doesn't believe she deserves it. She would rather leave than take the risk. She's ready to go. She tells Alice to kill her. That is when Alice steps forward. Without hesitation, she pulls Sade into a hug, a real, genuine embrace. And for the first time in what feels like an eternity, Sade cries. She breaks. She lets it all out. She admits what she never could before. This was all she ever wanted. Love, understanding, kindness, a simple hug. And just like that, it's over. Sade wakes up. The battle is done. When she opens her eyes, Daleth is there, crying for her. Daleth reaches out, and for the first time, Sade doesn't pull away. She gives the scars on the face of her sister. She apologizes. Daleth is overjoyed. The past doesn't matter anymore. None of it does. She wants Sade to come with them to show everyone her new face, the one free from pain, free from hatred. And as they prepare to leave, Walter finally accepts her. He acknowledges their friendship, something that never would have seemed possible before. But Sade isn't entirely free. Her power, the very thing that defined her for so long, refuses to be controlled. It twists, fights back, resists her. Sade isn't about to let her own magic control her. She is the most powerful witch. No force, not even her own, is going to dictate what she does. She rips off her scarf, standing tall, ready to fight back. The chaos rises again. Sade faces her own magic. Just when it looks like everything is about to fall apart, Zane and Walter arrive at the last second, and they cut through the disaster. They save everyone before it's too late. With the danger finally over, the others retreat to safety. Sade, without hesitation, takes full control. She forces her rebellious power into submission, crushing the last remnants of chaos in an instant. It's over. Daleth rushes forward. Without hesitation, she throws her arms around her sister. For the first time, there is no fear between them, only relief. She apologizes for everything. Then she turns to Bocchan. She asks the question that lingers in the air. If he wants to live a new life without the curse. Bocchan's answer comes without hesitation. No. He wants the life he has. The curse wasn't just suffering. It was the reason he met everyone. The reason he formed the bonds that now define his life. Without it, none of this would have happened. And more than anything, he wants to live with Alice and Rob. And now the long-awaited moment arrives. Sade lifts Nico's curse first. Finally, after years of waiting, Nico returns to his true age. No longer stuck in time, no longer trapped. He stands there, a grown man once more. The moment is pure joy. He walks freely, happy, content after what feels like an eternity. Then it's Bocchan's turn. After endless trials, battles, and heartbreak, it finally happens. Sade lifts the curse of Bocchan. And then, the proof. Bocchan reaches out. He takes the hand of Alice. No pain, no fear, just warmth. Alice, overwhelmed, throws herself into his arms. After everything, after all the waiting, they finally hold each other. Love, relief, tears. They thank Sade. She has given them back their future. Now it's time to return. Before they leave, Sade speaks. She has a lot to fix, a lifetime of damage to undo, and as for love, she shrugs it off. If everyone else gets to find happiness, she might as well find herself a lover too. And just like that, they return to the future. The moment Bocchan steps back into his rightful time, he is welcomed home. The curse that once defined him is gone, and the relief is overwhelming. Alice wastes no time. She throws herself at him, wrapping him in a hug and filled with pure joy. She doesn't have to hold back anymore. She can finally embrace him without fear. The moment doesn't belong just to them. Rob steps forward. For everything he has done, for all the years he has watched over Bocchan, there are no words that can fully express the gratitude. Instead, Bocchan shakes his hand. A simple gesture, but one that says everything. Thank you. Meanwhile, Daleth and Sage share a quiet conversation. Daleth approaches her, but she barely acknowledges her. She tells her to relax. She will reclaim her title as queen if she wants her to, and from now on she will be fun and easygoing as she were. Everything will be as it should be. Before they leave, there is one last visit to make. Bocchan and the others go to see his grandfather and grandmother. For Sage, this is more than just a meeting. It's a moment to finally close the past. A final confession, one that has been waiting far too long. She admits her feelings to Victor, something she never had the courage to do when he was alive. With that, the cycle is complete. She lets go, she moves forward. The night falls and they return to the mansion. The celebrations begin. A party is thrown in the honor of Bocchan. The curse is finally gone, and that alone is worth celebrating. Walter and Viola slip away, knowing the night belongs to Bocchan. Walter, ever aware of the truth, understands what this means. He is no longer the heir, but there is no resentment, no anger. He accepts it. This was never the life he truly wanted. Later that night, Rob sits alone, deep in thought. His mind lingers on the words of Victor. By tradition, the firstborn must become the head of the family. Now that Bocchan is free from the curse, his fate is sealed. He has to take responsibility. He has to step into his role. And with that, everything will change. His life, his relationship, his future. There's no avoiding it. He knows it. Alice knows it. But she has already made her decision. By the time Bocchan wakes up, she is gone. The letter is left behind. A silent goodbye. Panic sets in immediately. Bocchan runs to Rob, demanding to know where she is. Rob hesitates for only a moment before making his decision. He chooses to help Bocchan. He tells him where Alice is headed. With the help of Zane and Cuff, Bocchan races to the train station. At the same time, Alice sits on the train, lost in thought. She remembers everything, every moment, every person she met, every step that led her here. Then suddenly, Victor appears. Alice sees him and runs. She doesn't want to face him. She doesn't want to hear what he has to say. She pushes forward, moving through the train, trying to escape. But there's nowhere left to go. She reaches the end of the train. Still, he doesn't stop calling her name. He doesn't wait. He doesn't hesitate. This time, he says everything. He confesses. He tells her he needs her, that he doesn't want a future without her. He asks her to be by his side. Alice shakes her head. She tries to push him away. She tells him he doesn't need her. He has too many friends already. He isn't alone. But he doesn't let her go that easily. His friends matter. But she is different. She is special. He loves her. Then he tells her to go home and think about their future together. Alice stands there frozen. Then the emotions crash down on her all at once. She starts crying. Tears fall freely. She drops to her knees, overwhelmed, unable to hold it in. She admits she loves him too, but doubt lingers. Fear lingers. She looks at him, her voice shaking. She will only get in the way of the happiness he deserves. She wants to believe, but she's afraid. One morning, Alice wakes up Bocchan. He gets ready. Today is the day he is going to talk to his mother. He is going to tell her he is marrying Alice, and with that, he will finally stop being Bocchan. Bocchan finally lets go of the name that defined him for so long. He asks Alice to call him by his real name, Victor. With that, he takes the final step forward. Victor goes to Gerbera and tells her everything. He's going to marry Alice. He doesn't want to be the head of the family. He won't follow the path that was chosen for him. But Gerbera is already one step ahead. She listens calmly, then tells him there's no problem. She had already decided to give the title to Walter. Victor is free. He can be happy with Alice. There's only one condition. Since he is no longer part of the family, he has to leave the mansion. But that doesn't matter. The only thing he cares about is marrying Alice. They'll have their wedding at the mansion, and after that, they'll start a new life together, somewhere of their own. Outside, Walter overhears everything. He freezes. Then the reality of the situation hits him. He's the new heir, and then he completely loses it. He screams, absolutely horrified by the idea of taking over the family. But after a moment, he collects himself, congratulates Victor, and, in true Walter fashion, tells him to go to hell. Meanwhile, Daleth has her own problem. She has one final step to complete before she can fully become human. The big kiss from Walter. But there's just one issue. She has no idea how to ask him. Kido and Tedo try to give her advice. It doesn't help. She is still completely flustered, too embarrassed to bring it up. Then Sade arrives, who looks at her sister, knowing exactly what is coming. Daleth won't be a witch much longer. She'll leave this place. She'll live a normal life. A short life. One that will pass in an instant compared to her. For the first time, the weight of it settles in. Daleth will be gone someday, and Sade will still be here. But there is no regret. No sadness. Instead, they hug. Sade promises to support Daleth in anything, even if it means helping her convince Walter to accept her. Back in town, the future of Victo is falling into place. Zane and the director sit with him. The important thing is the director agrees to help Victor and Alice find a home. They won't be left wandering. They'll have a place to call their own. Meanwhile, Alice visits the circus. She watches the performers, taking in how much everything has changed. A new chapter is beginning for everyone. They reunite with Hugo, who is now older. Their meeting is brief but meaningful. Back at the main mansion, Gerbera is already planning the future of Walter. She goes over potential wife candidates, listing out names like it's a business transaction. Walter, completely uninterested, shuts it down immediately. He doesn't want to be handed a wife. He'll choose his own. Gerbera gives in, saying she'll wait until he introduces her to someone himself. When that day comes, she'll see what the deal is. But something else is bothering Walter. Daleth has been missing. He hasn't seen or heard anything from her, and it's starting to get to him. Then, just like that, he sees her again. At the same time, Daleth is busy practicing to convince Walter to accept her. She is determined. This is her future, and she's not backing down. Just as Walter prepares to leave, he runs into Sharon. She doesn't say much, but it's clear Sade wants to make peace with her. The moment finally arrives. Daleth only needed one thing to complete her transformation, a kiss from Walter. But instead of just saying that, she was given an entire list of unnecessary steps to take first. Walter has had enough. He cuts through all the nonsense, turns to Daleth, and tells her to just do it. No more waiting. No more hesitation. And then they finally kiss. The moment is electric. Daleth transforms, fully, completely, irreversibly human. The realization hits her all at once. She screams then, without holding back, confesses everything she feels for Walter. Later that night, Victor, now fully settled into his future, sits with Rob. While giving him a massage, Victor lays out options of Rob. He can stay with Victor and Alice, or return to the main mansion, or travel with Victor and Liz, or do whatever he wants. The choice is his. Rob, ever composed, tells Victor not to worry. He will figure things out in his own time. Meanwhile, chaos unfolds. Victor checks the wedding invitations, and everything goes completely crazy. Nico decides not to go. He's already old, and it's time for someone else to take the journey. Instead, his former apprentice, Rubio, will go in his place. Victor walks with Gerbera. For the first time, they aren't arguing. They aren't distant. They stop to look at the flowers. Something simple, something peaceful. Then something shifts. He sees a side of his mother he never noticed before. A warmth, a softness he never thought existed. Tears well up in his eyes. All this time he thought she hated him. She didn't. They embrace, and for the first time, they truly reconcile. The preparations begin, and the guests start to arrive. One by one, familiar faces return. Rob steps forward. He's made his decision. He won't go back to the main mansion. His place isn't there anymore. He chooses to stay with Victor and Alice. A life away from them is unimaginable. Before leaving, he gives a doll to Viola, a keepsake, something to remember him by. Meanwhile, Sade and Sharon sit together. Sade apologizes for everything, every mistake, every terrible thing she did. She tells Sharon everything, every last detail of the mess she caused. But Sharon doesn't care about the past. She hated Sade once. She feared her. But in the end, she kept her promise. She saved Alice. That was all that mattered. The past is over. Just like that, they reconcile. And just like that, they are friends again. The moment everyone waited for, finally, it happens. Alice and Victor stand together. A lifetime of waiting. 2 whole seasons of struggle. An endless journey of love and loss. And at long last, they are married. Their first kiss seals everything. A new chapter begins. And that's a wrap. If you made it this far, you're a real one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you think, and maybe drop your favorite moment. More content coming soon, so stay tuned. See you in the next one.